Connect. Good evening, everybody. It's the Old Wolf coming at you Tuesday, October 12th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another one of the Witch and Wolf Wisdom podcast. As always, all music is owned, published, performed, composed by yours truly, except in exceptions, and I will make them clear with pieces and stuff, as in with my brother Greg Carr Schumann will be one of the elements that I will be sharing tonight. He's a good friend of mine, great musician, somebody that was there at the beginning of one of the most important journeys in my life, that being a parent when my son was born. Greg was also best man at my wedding at the time, though I don't blame him for that now. But hey, you know, it is what it is. Hello to everybody. I see Amy, I see Jamie, I see a whole bunch of people. It's great to see you, great to have you. Thank you again, as always, for coming out tonight. We're playing around a little bit with the technologies and stuff, so please feel free to use the commentary. We will interact to the best of our ability. If any of the elements, if it sounds too loud, if you can't hear us, if something's fucked up, just be like, yo, that's fucked up. It's okay. We don't mind. We appreciate the honesty. As a matter of fact, we promote it, we support it, we endorse it. So again, hello, Mandy, everybody else. So, again, for those of you who know me a little bit, those of you who know me a lot, I tend to travel a very, very wide spectrum of elements. And me and my lady took my son out today. We went out to Letchworth State Park, soaked in some sun and some beautiful natural energies. We also made it a point to stop by the reservation that's up here in northwestern New York. And Shiya gave me a little bit of history and information. And why don't you tell everybody about, just a little bit, about the tribe that is specifically up there.
It is the Tonawanda Seneca Nation that owns that land, and they have been there forever, since
been there
before
for
we got
quite
there.
some time.
But they've had a few bouts. Some of the history that I know about it, they've had a few bouts back and forth with the state, and managed to protect their tribal lands and their tribal interests. So we want to definitely support them.
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough road for them. The last treaty, called the Canandaigua Treaty, which was done back in the 1700s, had established a huge swath of land that was supposed to, again, been dedicated towards not only preserving their culture, but the element of, and I got to tell you, you know, from firsthand experience, the incredibly powerful natural beauty and energy that is in this area of the world. It's incredibly wild. Waterfalls, glacier cliffs, you know, incredible variations of trees and plants and, you know, everything that you imagine when you think about nature. And it was really nice. It was a really needed element to kind of get a little bit of that inner pop going.
Absolutely.
You know, because sometimes, again, the hardest thing we dance around are the things that, you know, inspire us, that drive us. And it's always easy, you know, to find context in the people around us. God knows there's enough chaos and insanity to keep us busy for multiple lifetimes, and some of you have been dancing those dances for multiple lifetimes.
Some of you too.
Well,
You
yeah.
choose to engage in this current lifetime.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, but anyway.
We digress. But yes, it is an incredibly powerful element. I can tell you that it was, again...
The energy on that land feels different too,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah. The energy is definitely different. Hello, Diane, Pam, Myra, everybody, again. Thank you again for joining us. Yeah, it was really wild to just, you know, that shift coming out of everything that's technology driven. I mean, the funny thing, the phones don't even fucking work right out there,
No,
which was pretty wild. It was
well,
just like,
it's because they won't allow cell towers
Yeah.
on their land.
you know,
and who can
it
blame
was
them?
really heavy. And we met a couple of very interesting people.
Yep.
Gentleman by the name called himself Uncle.
Yes.
But it really was, and part of what my theme is going to be tonight is going to be the context about how we perceive each other, how we interact, and there are so many ugly, just warped out stereotypes and perceptions
Oh yeah.
because of how history has played out. Again, full disclosure, those of you that know me or have interacted with me to any degree know that I am very much called to a lot of the elements within Native American spirituality, for lack of a better way to call it.
Well, honestly, that's one of the things that initially attracted me to you. You had on your dating profile, old school shaman.
Well, that's just a very superficial glaze.
But it was a nice enough glaze to get me to look twice.
But again, in the framework of this particular, and leave it to the fucking witch to just throw some random shit grenade. It's like I got a theme, I got a thought, I'm getting all serious, I'm trying to go there, and then...
No, I'm just saying, you got those Native American things, definitely.
Yeah, well, again, some of it is in the very simplest of aspects, and this is also part of some of the Celtic pagan elements that I embrace, for another label that you want to slap on it. It's just, our connection with the earth, nature, the elements, the not only understanding, I feel, but the humility of again, its vastness and its power.
Yeah.
And with that, I believe is at least one of the core elements in respecting that. You know what I mean? Because that's half the problem.
Lost the respect for the earth, I think.
To a lot of degrees, we take it for granted.
We do, and I think that's one of the things that we need to understand is our origins, the origins of this land, and then respecting it.
Right. And the Native Americans who and I say we with a big hashtag, parentheses, quotation marks, emphasis, bold, italic. We,
yes,
as in, our colonists who came over and claimed this land, and the whole American concept was really at the expense of an entire series of cultures. Now, granted, you had variances within the different nations, within the different tribes, between the Sioux or the Apache, or as you said, with the Huron, the Iroquois. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But there was, an element within that was lost and overwritten, and that is a common theme. And if you look at it, throughout history, the same analogy is true within, the Gaelic, pagan, Celtic aspects that pretty much got driven, erased, and or overwritten by Christianity.
The whole St. Patrick's Day, celebrating all the snakes out of Ireland. The snakes weren't
fucking
snakes.
Columbus Day. For the record, I fucking hate Columbus Day, by the way.
It's
just have to throw that out there.
Officially, federally recognized also as Indigenous People Day.
Well, it's a step in the right direction, but I'm sure I've had conversations over the years that certain things sometimes ring a little bit hollow. We'll throw shit out there to be like, hey, look, we're politically correct now.
Bullshit. Bye-bye.
It doesn't necessarily hold water.
What I'm saying is, like, on St. Patrick's Day, it's like, that's the day they celebrate St. Patrick for kicking all the snakes out of Ireland.
Right.
Do you know what the snakes were that he kicked out of Ireland?
Oh, hit me.
The pagans.
Well,
the pagans were called snakes. They called the pagan snakes.
I don't do that lizard thing.
When they finally got rid of all paganism in Ireland, and Ireland became a completely Christianized nation, those dirty pagans, they were all kicked out of Ireland.
Well, again,
it's the way it is that they like to get bring in their own culture and forget what's already there. History
has proven that, when the new comes in, the old tends to get, squashed underneath. But certain elements still carry over. How people perceive, like we were talking the other night about the word, witch and witchcraft.
Yes.
The connotations that go with it. You know, it's always been, at least from the basic framework, a negative context. That's why you'll see your images of witches always have the pointy nose and the green skin.
Yes.
They're all haggy and nasty. You know what I mean?
We were demonized. Witches were not. We never called ourselves witches.
Right.
We wouldn't call ourselves a damn thing back then. We were just the wise ones. If you were.
Well, most of the elements they were priestesses.
Yes, priestesses.
Or acolytes.
Or herbalists. Or
servants even.
Or even just the village frickin' midwife.
Right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. If it was any kind of an outspoken, learned, kind, whatever, do things for the community woman, they were a threat.
But again, these elements carried not only through cultural elements, but through generational, societal, and they've carried over for hundreds, if not thousands of years to certain degrees within certain analogies. So, it is an element that I think is indicative to the human condition, which kind of brings me into the segue, and it's a bit of a fucked up segue, but again, I figured...
I will follow your fucked up segue.
Sometimes the universe speaks to us very loudly, and I was struggling earlier today with, what did I really want to come out here? What needed to be said? That this was kind of the framework you and I talked about originally, was that it's been a little difficult to juggle some of the interactive discussion elements within the lives when we're doing readings and those types of things versus like this now where we can just be
talk about.
we can just be like blah, 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 what I mean, and throw it all out there. Welcome everybody.
Welcome Elspeth, Liz and Diane.
But yes, certain things the universe will speak to us and say, hey. So I asked the question. I was like, all right, give me a sign. What do you want me to talk about? And it hit me in the strangest of fucking ways. And tonight's segue, in the context of the title of tonight's podcast, Dude Looks Like a Lady. And Dude Looks Like a Lady segues into one of my definitely top 10 comedians who I have been a very big fan of for many years, and I think he's an incredible comic as well as an incredible human, Dave Chappelle. And within that framework is the fucking chaotic tweakathon that has once again fired up in regards to his comedy. And for those of you who don't know, Dave just dropped, I think it was a day or two ago, the last of his Netflix stand-up specials. Now, warning, for those of you who have never... Trigger. Those of you who have never experienced Dave Chappelle is not Mr. Rogers.
No.
He's not the guy that's going to come out there with flowers and going to make balloon animals and, he definitely comes from that school, which is like, well, if you don't fucking like it, fuck you, that's on you.
Right.
So
comedians have always, throughout history, picked controversial topics to talk about.
Well, comedians, at least in my experience, and from, those that I have followed over the years, everybody from, George Carlin to Richard Pryor, Paul Mooney, and a lot of others, they use the elements of the world around us, our societal elements, our cultural elements, to really highlight these elements in a way, and I talk about this a lot, that people could understand. And one of the beautiful gifts of laughter, comedy, is that it makes things easier to process, easier to understand. The flip side, however, is not everybody always finds the same thing funny.
Sometimes it gets under their skin.
Right. And sometimes it's reflective of the bigger problem, the element within each of us individually in how we perceive, in how we choose. And this is, again, a key element. We choose to react. Okay? We don't have to always agree on things. We don't have to always like elements of things. However, there is that fine line sometimes where it becomes, a little bit, and Ash throws it out there, and I think that's a great point. People are trigger.
Yes.
Trigger. There's a lot of easy things, and that, again, also, as she says, is part of the element here, and this was one of the frameworks of this last stand-up that he did, is the framework of cancel culture, and how we immediately have now moved to this, we don't like something, so we try to stomp it out.
Yeah.
And again, there is a case to be made that certain elements, especially when they go outside the box, that, needs to be looked at, but, a case...
For example, rape culture needs to be canceled.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. But understanding and being able to talk about things, anything, I don't think that's...
in my opinion, there's a big difference between that and then, telling a joke about, a trans guy and, his uncomfortability with, being in the bathroom and, seeing a big hairy cock come out from under a skirt. I mean, as a man, I can honestly say that most of men are conditioned to not only respond negatively to that, but it is a conditioned and taught fear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it is reinforced religiously. Pretty much all religious framework cultures, approach that element of sexuality as like, the ultimate taboo. You know what I mean? It's just like, and I hate to say it, but, I remember this as a child that, like if you even, thought about dick in your head, you were going to hell.
Oh dear.
You know what I mean? So let alone, anything else.
Yeah.
But, within the same framework, it was okay to beat up your wife if she didn't, have your dinner ready for you at 5 o'clock. So, a lot of it was really just these fucked up double standards. But his point, and this is where the controversy has come, is within his long-running, I guess you could say, disagreement with the trans community.
Okay.
And the theme has been is that a lot of people within the trans community feel that Dave, and quote unquote from his own words, punches down on them, that he uses the lowest common denominator to insult them, to take advantage of them, to make them quote unquote the butt of the joke. He's referred to as being, transphobic, and all these very negative elements, like, again, Dave got up in the morning and be like, oh, those fucking bitches, I'm gonna make them pay for putting out that fake pussy on me. Now,
oh goodness,
all things being equal, and I think this was the greatest point, and it was really the end of the show, so I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I think it's important to say in the earlier stages of the framework, empathy isn't black. Empathy isn't gay.
No.
Empathy is bisexual. It goes both ways. It has to. Okay? By default, empathy, the context of caring, feeling, the emotional element, it transcends, because we have empathy for animals.
I'll go for multidimensional.
Multidimensional is good.
Across the board.
But for the framework of this argument, it is bisexual. Sexuality is not a variable in caring for people.
No,
and his argument was that if a lot of these people, and I'll step back and reframe my words, if a lot of these people had actually really listened to what he was saying, the underlying elements beyond the comedic and sometimes, shocking elements of his descriptions within his comedy routines, he was incredibly supportive of those elements. He uses his humor in the context of how he creates the imagery, the punchline, the story, whatever you want to call it, to try and get people to look at it differently. Now, again, I know a lot of people I've talked to have issue with Dave because a lot of his comedy also straddles within the racial elements. And, as a black comic, you can't blame a guy who is, again, been
I've
born
seen most
into
black comedians who would actually pull a lot of their comedy into the racial elements. I've seen Asian comedians do the same with the Asian humor.
Absolutely. It is a
Now,
relative.
if a white person tried to do that,
Well, listen, I mean, as Dave would say, white folk, we fucked up for a long time, so, we got some bills to pay.
yeah, true that.
And a lot of white folk are very uncomfortable with that. They don't see it, they don't understand it, and then that obviously kicks it into the next level.
It just,
right.
To me, highlights the privilege. But
Now, again, a bad person is a bad person, regardless if they're black, white, yellow, green, red, you know what I mean? That's where that spectrum within the empathy comes into. But again, our perceptions, and Dave also talked about this thing, and I talk about it a lot, are the constructs that are created. And he used another analogy about, for him, as a black man, you know what I mean? In elements within certain frameworks of our culture, of our society, of how things work, you know what I mean? It is always framed around that element because that is the perceptional base.
People go for appearances first.
Right.
Yes.
Now, granted, you can make a case that, again, if you take a word out of context, yes, you can make any case. We can justify any crazy fucking stupid fucking thing that we want when we decide to play the semantical game and split the hairs and, as Bill Clinton would say, define.
I categorically deny having
define
sex
with
that woman.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And granted, I'm not saying that from a political context. I'm just saying that from a straight up context. As a man, as a father, that was fucking embarrassing. You know what I mean? Just, say yes.
Say yes.
The intern sucked my dick. I fucked up.
Yeah, but he technically, quote unquote, didn't have sex, so he wasn't.
Well, right.
lying,
So,
blah, blah, blah.
we create these little spin jobs. Now, again.
But all of life is about a spin job. Who's
that's
where?
that's what comedy is about. It's to emphasize, to really, in some degrees, overemphasize, to create.
Actually, if you look back to some of the first comedians, those were the fools in the King's
Court.
Yes. And very frequently, the fool would be able to point out the fallacies of the ruler without worried about getting their head chopped off, because they were able to say, hey, look at this, I'm going to make a joke about it, isn't this fucking stupid, and give people a chance to rethink things. And I think that's what your buddy here is doing, is he's like, look, I'm trying to point out something here, if that makes some sense. I'm trying to point out an issue, a problem, and how people are perceiving things. So, I think that comedians, Dave included, try to bring to light some of the stupid shit that we kind of set up our frameworks around.
Yes, and a lot of it, unfortunately now, has become so polarizing that if you dance outside the framework, even a little bit, it can be, in my opinion, a huge overcompensation. And again, that was one of the themes. It's like, I've been dancing this element, for, X amount of years. Now, he had a very poignant story element that I think is also very important to share. Throughout all that, and insanity and everything like that, Dave is Dave. He does what he does. But Dave also is one of the few people that actually took a stand against some of the elements that was going on. For those of you who don't know, Dave walked away from a multi-million-dollar show, basically told the man and the companies and everybody else behind us, said, you know what, you all can go fuck yourself. And he walked away from it. He walked away because he needed to make a statement. He needed to find a different way to do the things that he did. And this was during the period of the Chappelle show. Yes, Ash caught it exactly, 50 million. And, he's human, he's gone through those things, we're all honest to the degree that we can. So he's never been one to be like, hey, I never fucked up. He said, we've all fucked up. But as far as the element of being transphobic, of, doing these things that have really, again, been the center of all this drama, you know what I mean, really is a falsehood. You know what I mean? It is a spin. And what it does is it creates a convenient target to force within an element of an agenda. Now, granted, these elements, everybody should have the right to love who they want. If you want to be a man and a man to a woman, if you want to be a dog, hey, listen, whatever works for you, that's you. But there is the other side of the coin, that some of these elements, especially when you try and force them into mainstream elements, are by default going to cause elements of conflict.
People don't like change. People don't like the unfamiliar.
Right.
People don't like what makes them uncomfortable.
But again, when you look at it in a framework, and this is one of the analogies he used, you know what I mean? We'll go batshit, you know what I mean, over, you know, stuff like this. But, you know, other elements will just get
Like starving children.
Right.
Yeah,
Or,
who
you
cares
know,
about starving children?
1,001 other, you know, horrible elements.
Exactly.
Now,
Or
the
starving
analogy
children.
that I was describing before, you know, the story he was telling, that, you know, through all these elements, he had met a woman who was transgender, had originally been a man, and she wanted to be a comic. So he let her basically open up one of the shows. The way he describes the story, you know, she fucked it all up, but during the interactions afterwards and the way he interacted with her, it really gave him not only insight, but created a really positive framework about the perceptions and the interactions between people who have chosen an alternate lifestyle and the rest of us in trying to not only understand it, but also accept it. And he ended up becoming friends with her. And, you know what I mean, became good friends with her.
Cool.
And the last Netflix special that he did, trans community came out again, lost their fucking minds because, you know, he made the, you know, the commentary about the fake pussy and, you know,
Oh dear.
all the other things that just make people lose their fucking minds. But she came out, and she came out on one of the social media platforms and defended him. And
Which probably made her persona non grata.
well, and they just came out and wanted to fucking, you know, drag her to the fucking stake and burn her too.
Jesus.
But this is where it gets fucked up. 6 days into this, she went to the top of a building and jumped and killed herself.
Oh my God, no.
Okay. Now, he was very clear. He said he doesn't know if it was that or if it was something else or a combination of elements that were going on within her life, but ultimately it led to her taking her life.
So her own
And-
community
and it-
was that cool to her
Well,
for defending him?
You know, not the whole community, but in the framework of his story and the analogy he was using within the special to get the point across, is that he had a legitimate relationship with her. It wasn't a sexual relationship, it wasn't romantic, it was a
Friendship.
professional friendship based on comedy.
Right.
And her sexuality didn't apply into it. And she knew, she understood what he was trying to do. She supported it, okay? Went out there and defended him, and they still dragged her down. And in the end, so, you know, this is the disgusting, destructive cycle that we all have to live within, are the perceptions and the stereotypes and the, you know, my God is better than your God, my dick is bigger than your dick, and all the blah, blah, blah in between. And ultimately, at the end of the day, empathy, the connections that we should be focusing on, that we all have in common,
Person to person.
right, none of it applies. Sexuality doesn't apply. Religious dogma doesn't apply. None of it applies. Now, granted, I understand. Listen, I'll be the first one to admit there are certain elements within it that I'm not 100% on. You know what I mean? I support the concept, you know, that a person, if they feel that, you know, this is their path, that's fine. But personally, I have a really big problem, you know, when you've got a 16-year-old kid who decides he wants to identify with a woman and then goes onto the women's wrestling team and beats the shit out of every other woman within the school system, because guess what? He's not really a woman, man, and I'm sorry, but that
There are physiological differences
Right.
between men and women as far as, you know, strength, upper body strength, or...
and that's not to
you
be
know,
disparaging to women, but I believe it's unfair. One of the other elements that he used, and I think this is also a great analogy, I have no issue with Caitlyn Jenner. I have no problem with the fact that Bruce decided one day that he wanted to be Caitlyn, and that's fine and that's cool. But Bruce was Caitlyn for a year, and then he got Woman of the Year award. And I think Dave's point on this is dead on. there are a lot of women out there that are offended by that.
Yeah.
That there have been generations within the context, and say what you
Where
want, women have fought and struggled and bled and died for elements.
Yeah, I have a lot of transgendered friends, and more than most, I think. But I know that I, as well as several of my transgendered female friends, were offended by that as well.
Yes, and I agree. I agree with that baseline concept that you have the right to identify, but does that somehow now really, again, it's this really kind of gray area. But if you think about somebody else's perspective, and Dave's analogy, and I thought this was a great analogy, to him it would be the same context of a white person wearing blackface.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And in the early 1900s, when we first started to have, vaudeville and theatrical elements, blackface was an accepted element because they didn't allow black people to perform.
Yeah.
So to have those types of characters, it was white people wearing blackface. Now again, I'm white, and I get it. It's fucking offensive, man.
Yes,
it creates a framework that really, again, belittles an element, but it doesn't mean in the same framework that it defines everybody else on the same end of the scale. AKA, you can be transgender, you can do all these elements, but again, like Ash says, there are elements that are different, and it isn't fair to everyone else.
I, as a woman, would not feel fair if there was a transgendered woman that was competing against me in a physical contest. I would not feel like it was fair. But at the same time, I will fully accept a transgendered post-op woman as a woman, that she is living.
Yeah,
female.
Absolutely. But I think there are subtle little lines that, again, especially in context, and especially in the element that when we're dealing with children, that we have to have a little bit of those boundaries, because especially when you're talking about those early developmental aspects, and I'm not saying this to say that children shouldn't be allowed to express
a tom girl
element.
I was a tom girl, but I'm definitely female.
Because there's nothing worse than being ostracized and made to feel like you don't belong. I don't support that element in any shape or form. However, you have to frame it to some degrees with all the other children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
it isn't just a simple analogy.
Is that they've said this is a girl's activity and this is a boy's activity. So if a girl wants to do a boy's activity, then obviously she must be identifying as a man. And if a boy wants to do a girl's activity, then obviously she's identifying. You know what? Let them do whatever the fuck
that's
they
part
do.
of that perceptional breakdown. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
Cook, and if a girl wants to play football, who the fuck cares? Doesn't mean that they have to say that this is their sexual identity going forward from there. It's. But I do believe that if like drinking age should be like a good age for them to make a decision which way they'd like to.
Again. There has to be a bit of a balance, and Ash makes a point. She said it upsets her that calling people mother is being written out, or calling women because it hurts someone's feelings.
I'm proud to be a woman.
Right, and again, in the scope of it, everybody, and Cindy says it really well, let everybody do what they want, but there has to be at least a somewhat of a framework within certain elements of things. Like, again, I hate to say it, I don't have a problem with women serving, in the military, you know what I mean, and vice versa. I was a single father. I learned how to cook and clean and do all the things that quote unquote were a woman's job. You know what I mean? These gender assignments are kind of bullshit in this modern age.
I agree.
Because we all have to function within, I think, both ends of the spectrum. And that's really, I think, where the best balance comes in. Understanding, as you would call it, the divine feminine, and understanding that there is a role that men have to play, but that we need to get rid of the old toxic elements.
The toxic masculinity, all that fun stuff. And at the same point, We need to get rid of the toxic femininity too. Okay, you know, there's toxic on all sides. Like we women, we can be asshats to each other.
Well, I mean, again, here's another piece from his special. And listen, I recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it. Watch it. You know what I mean? Watch it, listen to it twice. Really listen to what Dave is talking about.
Watch this now,
I think he did a really good job. Some white people, you know, might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but, you know, hey, this is the burden of being white today. You know what I mean? Welcome to the club. But that's okay, because I think that's really where we'll start to heal, and we might really be able to start to change some of these dynamics is when we start to really accept looking at it from other, well, talking about it too.
You know, having conversations to where we can agree to disagree. We don't have to agree on everything. May, there's sound.
Yeah, honey, you're going to have to check your end of the spectrum, because we are running at full steam. Full volume, yes. So. Yeah, sometimes, especially depending upon where you're listening to us from, and it looks like you're listening to us from YouTube, there's a little mute button on the volume thing.
Yeah, you might want to make sure.
Yeah, YouTube usually just starts off muted. Yeah, Ash says it great. You know, not everything masculine needs to be labeled toxic, but some element, you know, really do need to be put out there. And a lot of it, again, is that perceptual element, and it does carry over specifically into elements of sexuality, aka in regards to women. And then obviously the flip side is that grayer area where you start going into these alternate elements, men who are women, women who are men. You know, there are certain analogies. I won't throw it out here tonight, but one in particular pops in my mind. And I really want to go there, but I'm not going to be that guy. But what I will be doing, though, and I want to kind of segue a little bit of this, as I mentioned, me and my brother, Greg Schumann, are going to be working on some new music together. He's a dear friend of mine, known him for many years. Was there at the beginning, as they say, but I'm going to attempt to, yes.
There you go.
Look at that. There we go.
Yay.
And there is the link. That is my brother Greg Schumann and his album Timeless Classics, Volume 1.
Volume 1.
Yes.
Excellent.
Some great tracks that Greg recorded himself and did. And I know a lot of you, like elements of music that you wouldn't necessarily hear other places.
Yes.
So I am shamelessly promoting my brother tonight. Check him out. Give him a couple of subscriptions if you could.
Yes, please.
Give him some likes. As always, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us out greatly to keep doing the things that we're doing, to be able to interact, not only here, but, on the lives and the fireside chats and the workshops and, the mentorship circle. I mean, it's really
we got a lot of stuff going on, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we have a lot of really incredible support. Melanie France,
I just got a Swear Tarot in from her today. Her new
You gonna crank that out tomorrow?
I am gonna crank that out tomorrow.
Ooh, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes. It's what
the witch is cracking out a new deck.
It is What the Fuck
Spread the
Wednesday.
word. What the Fuck Wednesday, and it's gonna be whack.
Swear Tarot.
Swear Tarot.
Yes.
Ooh.
Swear Tarot.
You give me goosebumps.
Goosebumps, yeah, because we like that word fuck.
Yeah. Such language.
But no, I mean, I know where you were kind of thinking about going, and I think that if we hold it in a certain framework, you can kind of go there about people who hate themselves no matter what they do. Is that where you were kind of thinking about before? No,
Ash, never
Karen,
apologize for being chatty. That's great. That's part of what
it.
this is about. And Karen, we're not doing any tarot tonight.
This is
podcast, but Shiya will be back on tomorrow night, 8 p.m.
Absolutely. And we can
to
talk
do tarot.
about whatever topics.
Right.
If you guys
but Karen, listen, again,
hang around.
No, today's not the day for mediumship. I was going to say, you could throw anything out there, Karen, but mediumship.
You're right.
And of course, you hit the one thing
one thing
that you cannot ask for out here. You could ask for just about anything else, and theoretically...
Wolf does not like the Dance of the Dead.
No, the wolf is very, very sensitive to dead people.
So...
Yes, and we'll just leave it at that. We're not playing Ghostbusters tonight.
Ah, Cindy says he sounds really good. Thanks for the
He is. He's a really great
fantastic
musician. He's a great writer. He and I actually started writing music some 25, 26 years ago. And we both had young children. My son was born about a year after his daughter. And, this is the world that we live in sometimes. Both being parents and going through the life elements of not only raising children, but relationships and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah.
His path went to the left and my path went to the right. We stayed in contact in different ways, over the years, but we didn't really connect until about a month ago, down in New Jersey for my brother's 60th birthday party, Chris Miller, and he and I and my brother Tony Rodriguez from my days with Broken Past. By the way, again, selfless promotional elements. Anybody who's ever looking for the best tattoo work on the East Coast, possibly on the planet. Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, tattoo, Tony Rodriguez. Under My Skin, tattoo shop. Again, Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. I don't have a link to put up there, but I'll start adding that into my little suite of... Click a button, here you go, here's the link, follow this here. But yes, and my brother Ray Hurley, who's also a member of the Under My Skin for Life Foundation. I've mentioned this before. Yeah, I'm gonna do one of my songs in a little bit and kind of highlight the foundation. They just did their big Arts for Autism event a couple weeks ago.
$6,000.
Oh yeah, almost $7,000. Yep. So yeah, we've been doing events for many years now. Obviously, the pandemic has shifted some of those elements, so this was the first real event they've done in over a year, but it was a really great turnout. They had a lot of great bands. They had wrestling. They had a motorcycle run, art, a lot of really cool supporters who came out and signed autographs and posed for photographs and all that beautiful stuff. But again, back to the other thing we're doing. The common theme, again, and how he ended his show was, again, that empathy is not black. Empathy is not gay. Empathy is bisexual. Because bisexual is a word that I think most people, even if they don't like it, they understand. It means you go both ways. Empathy goes both ways.
It does.
Okay? It is not a framework, again, of sexuality, again, a religious dogma, the color of your skin, how much you weigh, how much money you have. So, if there is anything to take away, and this is what really compelled me to say, all right, this is why tonight was going to be tonight, that is really the element that we should be talking about. That is the element that should be taken away from.
That we should care about.
Right, is that?
People.
And hello to Stephanie and Cindy. If you're under a tornado watch there, honey, you take care of yourself. Listen,
Absolutely.
As big as my ego is, I'd rather you be okay than listening to my fucking podcast. The podcast will be here. You take care of you, and we'll send you a little bit of our magical energies, and hopefully,
protection over
kind of
stay safe.
Put a little bit of a buffer against the elements.
Well, I think one of the elements of what it is that everybody has insecurities. Whether they admit it or not, you can take the most confident seeming person in the entire fucking world, and somewhere in there's going to be a layer or level of insecurity. And what happens is that to feel better about people's insecurities, they like to kind of maybe frame it out to put somebody else down in order to answer and feel better about themselves.
To some degrees, I think that definitely can apply. But
I think that people lose their empathy in trying to kind of frame out and feel good about yourself to get through an insecurity, and so therefore they let go of the element of empathy.
Again, to some degrees that can apply in certain contexts and situations. Me personally, I think the bigger driving element is the conditioning.
Okay.
that we are taught, we are conditioned
This is wrong.
to respond to certain elements, to act in certain elements of things, be it again either from a religious framework or from a cultural framework. You know what I mean? Again, you just look at it even just from the one slice, using my own personal analogy within, you know, Roman Catholic Christianity, that framework. Homosexuality is a crime.
Yeah, I know the
And
Catholic Church.
it is taught from the very beginning. It is reinforced and emphasized with visions of brimstone and hellfire and eternal suffering. I don't know. I mean, again, as far as a marketing pitch goes, I don't know where else you can go besides eternal damnation, fire and misery and pain. You know what I mean? That, you
And I
know, they're
was
not
taught
fucking
that
around.
Even
Like,
in the born again world that I kind of grew up in, I was taught the same framework.
Yeah.
They're going to hell. We got to pray the gay away. You know, all that sort of thing.
now,
Right.
it all, for me, it had a secondary layer
Okay.
in the time frame, in, you know, the cultural element, beyond the religious element, within the framework of Italian American culture. Homosexuality, forget about it.
Forget about
You know
it.
what I mean? You get
Talking to me?
you could, you know, you could go out and you could, you know, rob 3 banks, deal drugs, fuck your neighbor's grandmother, but God forbid you got caught with somebody else's badul in your fucking mouth.
Oh my God.
That was it. Okay? You would get whacked. And it was, again, conditioned within the framework of our culture. Words like faggot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have an obvious negative, derogatory connotation.
Connotation,
Now, I mean, again, you know, you go over to England and you're like, hey, you got a fag? You know, that's a cigarette.
And a cigarette. Yeah.
So, you know, that's again one of my common themes is that, you know, words are, you know, words don't mean shit without the context of the action, the intent behind the words. But, you know, just for myself personally, you know, those were 2 huge conditioning
Yeah.
variables that were prevalent
So how did
from
you
both
get
ends of the spectrum.
Out of that conditioning.
Well, for me personally, it was just simply, I think, an early realization that most of what was being fed to me was bullshit. It didn't make sense. I was blessed and cursed with the element from my mother of having the ability to think for
yeah.
myself,
Imagine that.
to be able to really, and not completely, but for a good part, to be able to read between the lines. Now, granted, it still had a carryover effect. This is the shitty end of the spectrum, that as much as we try and fight the tide, not unlike the river cutting through the mountain, over time, damage is done. So it will carry over in different degrees. But, you know, again, for myself, you know, I, as a musician, as a performer, I interacted within the realm of all the undesirables, the freaks, the hippies, the weirdos, you know what I mean? And within that framework, everybody was cool, unless you stole their stash or,
Yeah, don't
you
do
know.
that. That's a bad idea.
But, you know,
Yeah.
even I've had experiences, personal experiences. You know, I had a situation once where somebody of an alternate persuasion who was deeply under the influence of alcohol tried to force
oh dear.
a context, and I tried, I'm not gonna lie here, I tried to be, you know, not that guy, but, and I hate to say this, you know, as a man, when somebody who's obviously another man grabs my dick, the reaction wasn't good.
Well, honey, that's
I'm sorry, man. You know, it's just like,
that's inappropriate
you know,
under any
all of those
circumstance, so, yeah.
all of those conditioning elements. My brain was like, "Fuck you, faggot! It's on." And the next thing I know, my fist was like, "Oh, that's code to." And it was really, it was like an out of body experience. I'm like standing 3
But
feet
you
over
know what?
here,
If
and
somebody
my
walked
fist
up to
is
me-
just
If somebody walked up to me, male or female, and tried to grab my pussy, I'd do the same thing.
Well,
So,
there is a case to be made, but
that's
again,
inappropriate touching.
in retrospect, the
Regardless.
severity of the reaction had a little bit more of that underlying
conditioning
framework
element.
because of the conditioning of that.
Yeah.
And, and again, I was younger at the time. I didn't have as much of the experience and wisdom that I have now, for whatever that's worth, however much of it I actually have. But in the framework is that,
I think you have a
you know
lot
what
of
I mean?
wisdom.
It offended me.
Yeah.
And in that offense, it also threatened, like you said, an insecurity
Yeah.
about my sexuality. You know what I mean? That, again, you don't have to justify the elements, but when we're younger especially, we feel
we have to
that we have to fit into a
keep
particular
up the
framework.
appearances, keep up that,
So, again, it goes back to what I talk about, that male toxicity, where, you can't show weakness. And that was definitely one of those moments, oh no, you can't show no fucking weakness.
No.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I instinctively lashed out on it. Much more so than I believe that I would anywhere near it now, but more importantly in the framework of what
now
it
I
would,
think it'd be like-
how it applied to me in regards to my sexuality.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, like I said, inappropriate touching's inappropriate touching.
Right,
It's gonna have a graphic response.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the other thing. I had a woman down in Virginia, okay, when me and Will were playing with Broken Past, who rolled up on me and grabbed my dick as well too. Now, granted, I was a little loud about it, and I definitely wasn't exactly, cheery about it. I was like, yo, get your fucking hands off me. I don't know who the fuck you think you are. But I didn't put my hands on her.
But
I
that's
didn't.
that old,
I
that's that
right,
male
but
conditioning. You don't
that's
hit a
the
woman.
male conditioning. I couldn't hit her. Now, in the reverse situation, even though it was a man, she was, in her mind, a woman under the influence of alcohol, saw me and reacted within the context of her attractions.
Yeah.
Like it or not, again, it's not a reflection of me, but I didn't have that type of understanding, that experience to be like, no, listen, somebody else's sexuality doesn't define me. Now, again, to give, full disclosure, I defined my sexuality through my son's mother for years, and it was even more fucking twisted and fucked up. So when I say to you that these dysfunctional elements, not unlike empathy, they don't give a shit. Gay, straight, Furby, whatever, you know what I mean? It doesn't care. Just like death. Guess what? Death doesn't give a shit.
Death comes for everybody, rich, poor, and everything in between.
Doesn't care whose dick you're sucking.
Nope.
Okay? Doesn't care about whether or not you pray to the east or the west, or how much money you put in the collection plate, or any of those other kind of, little ritualistic elements that we kind of sprinkle around us to kind of ward off the boogeyman and the spirits and stuff. And so, I grew up within a very definitive hippie element, but mine was, again, warped, as I mentioned, because I had the conflicting Roman Catholic element. As I've said before, my mother was the hippie and my father was the religious freak trying to be a hippie, fell in love with a flip hippie chick, you know what I mean? It's a bad love story gone wrong, because, that's what happens when you throw acid and alcohol and
Oh dear.
rock and roll into the mix. But hey,
I grew
that's
up
another story.
like the whole yuppie suburban kind of thing. And it's a damn miracle I didn't get anywhere near as prejudiced as my dad, simply because he had, as an entrepreneur, had chosen to have a chain of hair salons. So from the time of 4, when my dad got these hair salons, I was constantly in the salons, therefore exposed to the fringe element through them. And through, realizing, hey, these gay guys are actually pretty nice. They're nicer than a lot of these other people. So I ended up with more gay male friends than I did even female friends,
See, I didn't have that context. I had two distinct elements. Sundays were all about playing the part. My father's family, again, very deeply tied into the Roman Catholic Church and the whole onward Christian soldier all the way back to the Crusades, blah, blah, blah. So Sundays were all about that. My mother was the progressive hippie, but as, you know, a woman and a wife in that time period, in that cultural context, she had to play the part to certain degrees to maintain the peace. So Sundays were the, you know,
Church day.
Hail God, everything was good, we're all perfect Christian soldiers. The other 6 days of the week was, you know, music and drugs and, you know, random people. You know, I remember many times, you know, in the early years, you know, would come downstairs in the morning and there'd be, you know, random naked people passed out here or there. Or,
wow, I can't imagine.
You know what I mean? Like. And, you know, just certain elements of things that were absolutely in complete contradiction to the Sunday God dance.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? And as that progressed for a few years, by the time I was 12 years old when my grandfather passed, him being the focal point of the whole religious element, once he died, the whole religious element was like, poof, you know, it was gone.
Even for your dad?
I'm not really sure. I think in his context, it was part of the dance. Because again, you know, in retrospect, everything he did was so contradictory to any of the elements of Christianity or you know, the elements of Catholicism, if you will. You know, he was a drunkard, he was a cheater, he was abusive, he lied, he manipulated. You know, in the end, he really, you know, he wasn't a good person. He really wasn't. And as horrible as that is to say, you know, sometimes the truth is the fucking truth.
Truth is truth.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't speak to what may have brought him down that path. I have my suspicions, but again, that's a podcast for another day.
Right.
But yes, they were all elements that were, again, part of that conditioning framework. Now, again, elements within, again, as I mentioned, like the Italian American community, within that cultural concept, also carried over into not only the perspective of, again, how men are supposed to react, but how we react, how we treat women. And that was a natural contradiction in the element with my mother, because my mother was just like, oh yeah, hell no. And that created, you know, so we had multiple cycles of chaos.
Yep.
All just bouncing back and forth, and even coming out the other end of it, it took a little bit. It took really getting to know people, to hear their stories, their experiences within different spectrums. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be any kind of expert, you know what I mean? But I have made it a point to get to try and know people from all different aspects of life, from different cultural elements to religious elements, sexuality, because, you know, stories are knowledge. Yes. That understanding is what allows us to grow, what allows us to adapt and evolve.
You interact with a whole bunch of different people, and they just come up and they talk to you, and you talk with them, and
to some degrees,
to a lot of degrees. I mean, to even to points where I would probably walk away from said person. You're like, no, tell me your story, man.
Well,
I've seen you do it.
To some degrees, it's also about that core element, empathy.
Yeah.
You know, when we are embracing our empathy.
Yep.
And if we're being honest, how do you, again, just simply turn it off? It's a double-edged sword.
I don't think you really can turn it off.
You know what I mean? I know, and I'll use Amy as an example because it's something Amy and I have in common. You know, even though I'm a performer and spent years performing and being in front of people, I still struggle with being around people. All it takes is like a cat to piss me off in the morning, like happened today, and my energy was whacked. I was fucking irritable, and every time we got around people, I was like a cat. My fucking haunches came up, my fucking tail popped up. I'm like, I'm not a cat, I'm a fucking wolf. But it goes to the deeper issue that I have triggers with cats. I'm not a cat guy, and somehow in my reality, I don't have one. I don't have two. I have 3 goddamn cats. That just basically...
And they all love you.
Do whatever the fuck they want.
But they all love you.
No, they don't. I'm a prop.
No.
Okay, I've resolved myself to that.
Clara loves you. Even Gracie loves you.
No.
Yes.
Listen, I don't even buy into that. They are demons sent from some alternate reality.
And Salem definitely.
To
He'll
test
come
me.
up and headbutt
No,
you.
Salem's a little different. He came with the house, and for those of you who don't know the story, Salem, our black cat, when I moved up here with my son, we moved in, and the cat was waiting on the front porch. It was like, hey, by the way, this used to be my house. It's cool. You guys can live here now, but I live here too, so these are the things that I need. And if you don't like it, I'm going to fuck shit up. And no joke, when we didn't fall into line with the cat literally destroyed our front screen until we were just like, okay, fine, you can come in.
Come in.
And then he came in, he was cool, he did cool things, and then we realized...
He brings us gifts.
and we realized he was magical. But he was magical in a way that was slightly chaotic. That's just like, yeah, you will drive me nuts. Shiya does the same fucking thing.
I do.
She'll talk to every, you say I
do it.
Shiya lied, okay? I do not talk to everybody. If I'm in a certain element, I can be that guy.
No, when you engage in somebody.
When I engage, but in the context of like in the store or like when we were out today, she's just having random conversations with people and I'm fucking freaking out in my head. I'm just like, please shut the fuck up. Don't talk to them. You don't know where they've been. Okay? You don't know what's going on. Huh?
What, the people from Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
They were nice.
But they could have been fucking serial killers.
I talk to people all the time there at the park.
I'm being sarcastic, but again, and I was making the context again,
Hey, John.
the reference back to Amy, that it's a commonality that she and I share, even though as a performer, I've spent years being in front of people. But it was a goddamn struggle. Brother John, it's great to see you before you go back to work there.
I guess I spent so much time growing up in complete enforced isolation that for me being able to talk to people and hear their stories and learn about people and that sort of thing is just like, it's a joy in certain circumstances.
I love
people. I
people.
don't like grocery stores.
Don't get me wrong, but I've been going through some pretty heavy shifts, and there are some elements, and no coincidences. I just did a workshop
on triggers,
on trauma triggers and stuff. There are certain elements that I am still struggling with. I'm not gonna lie, it has been difficult to stay framed within that honest element, because if I'm honest, and you and I were talking about it earlier, I have grown comfortable with the isolation element. I've joked with people, I was fucking, I was kind of in lockdown before it was cool to be in lockdown. Before any of the lockdowns came into effect and everybody's isolating shit, I was already doing that. So when it came down and everybody's like, you gotta stay in your house, I was just like, I've been doing this for fucking almost 2 years already. Well, this is no fucking biggie.
Unlike me, like when I went to Savannah by myself, I had the entire homeless population watching out for me because I was kind to one homeless person.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, that homeless person's like walking the streets with me and telling all the rest of the homeless people how cool I am. And then I've got everybody looking out for me, so I was perfectly safe on the streets of Savannah at 10 at night.
Yeah. And Cindy, I think you're right. He is definitely familiar. My son is definitely connected heavily with all kinds of things. He is
a
indigo.
Strong indigo.
Yes,
empath.
Incredibly. And
we call him the indigo monkey.
So yeah, him and Salem immediately bonded.
Yep.
And I'm not gonna lie, I love my son. So he just gave me the Puss in Boots look, and the cat gave me the Puss in Boots look, and they did the double tap Puss in Boots look on me, and I was just like, fuck, I can't win. All right, cat, you get to stay.
I just came with 2 cats.
Yeah, well, that was the trade-off too. I wanted her, and she came with the cat. So,
yeah, they love you.
And again, I joke about this a lot. A lot of any of you who've been on Shiya's lives have heard me, do the disembodied voice for dolls. I mean, I got fucking dolls on my wall.
Yeah, voodoo dolls, 3 of them.
Yes.
3 of my 4 voodoo dolls.
Cindy, you have a great evening.
Be safe, my dear. So yes, our pets can be very healing. They can also be annoying at times.
And listen, sometimes the universe compels us. Ash just shared a little thing, about an experience she had at the DMV. She found out about the woman's breast cancer and plans for vacation. and shared her lotion because my tattoo was looking dry. Best friends everywhere. It's a great analogy.
That's the way
Listen,
I
there
feel
is a
too,
case,
Ash.
and that's beautiful. And that really is in the spirit of that element of empathy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, just like May said, our pets are also, very healing. They are empathic. We build
Yes.
relationships and connections with them just like we will with people.
Very
People
much so.
have those relationships with plants. You know what I mean?
That's
And they're
true.
just as equally as valid. It's just, again, that perspective, our context, if you will, in how we choose to relate. You know what I mean? And, again, that spectrum from the earlier element of sexuality, be it, dude looks like a lady, or, you
Lady
want
looks like a dude.
you want to put on one of those Furby suits and
Have fun.
dance that particular dance, hey, more power to you.
It doesn't really matter, and that people turn around and get threatened by it. If you're staying in your lane and I'm staying in my lane, who the fuck cares?
Again, within reason.
Yeah.
Within reason, But there's also, again, many times, especially if something triggers us, we owe it to ourselves to look at ourselves to see what's really
What's really
driving
going
this.
on?
What's
Where did that
really
come
in
from?
play here? It's just against some construct that, somebody else, slapped down and said, oh, well, this means this. Versus just looking at it from not only so much an honest, but looking at it from somebody else's. I mean, it really is the core of that apathy and that self-centered element
Yeah.
that, we don't want to look at
don't
elements
wanna have to
of
look
how
deeper.
other people perceive things, or more importantly, how it makes them feel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's one of the
Yes,
reasons-
no, my phone, like I talk to my phone's like, oh, you want to talk to me? You're like, no, phone, I
No,
don't want to talk to you.
you. It's like, what was that? There was some kind of movie where a guy fell in love with the AI on his phone. I never
I'm not
watched it. I
sure.
heard about it, but they want to talk to you. They want friends.
Well, I mean, back in the day, there were the 1-900 sex lines where, you had.
Nowadays they have the OnlyFans where you can.
Well,
guess,
I mean,
or-
the internet now is just
The
a
internet.
fucking bottomless pit of pretty much whatever, insane fetish, and just like, okay, goats, jello, and boomerangs. And
Here.
I can pretty much guarantee you're gonna find you'll get a cross search porn hit with that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
not right.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not right. Hey,
Oh, yeah.
Sherry, how you doing, babe?
It's deep.
Yeah.
It's fucked up. But yeah, well, listen, again, the only limitation is just the elements of people's minds.
Right.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's going to make sense. Like, there was a, Sherry's like, I have a love-hate with internet and social media. I know that feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
Know
me
that
too.
feeling all too well.
I
But
mean, I love the connections that we can have with people, but you're right. It can get the web can get very.
oh
deep
yeah,
and
I mean, some of it now has just spiraled.
out of control.
Not so much as out of control. It's just, again,
Out of control.
there's certain things that just don't, in my mind, make sense. Now,
It's
again, I
out
get
of
it.
control.
It's not supposed to make sense because it's not my framework. But I would like to have the conversation one day, and if anybody has this experience and like to come on and have the conversation, I freely invite you. But what's with the gerbils in the ass thing? Is that? I mean, that's a real thing.
That's been a real thing for a long time.
It's
since
been a
before
real
the
thing for a
internet
long
came out.
time. I remember as a teenager, people were like, "Oh, you hear about that guy? Yeah, you got called a gerbil and shit." And I'm just like, "What a fucking
I
what?"
don't understand it, but hey.
I get the ass play.
I've actually had somebody explain it to me one time, and then I was so triggered by it that I just completely wiped it from
Like,
my mind.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I just, again, now I know that's a horrible segue, and some of you are probably, what the fuck? But that's the element of it, you know what I mean? These perceptional aspects. We don't have a framework. You know what I mean? One of the elements that I did on a completely different end of the spectrum, when I became a father, I talked to other people about elements of that because I didn't have, for all practical intents, anything of a father figure to work from, let alone anything fucking positive. Now, I joke about how I just did everything opposite to him, but it really wasn't just that simple. I got input and insight from other people who actually knew what the fuck they were doing and had experience and insight to share. Now, again, in the same analogy, and the correlation is, again, I may not be able to understand or even relate to somebody who wants to be a woman who's a man, or a man versus a woman, or a man versus a gerbil in this particular
as
element.
long as somebody asks the gerbil. I mean, the poor thing.
All right, so that's a great segue. How does a gerbil give consent?
I don't think a gerbil could ever give consent.
Right.
I don't think a gerbil would ever.
How do we approach that particular little snafu?
Right. You don't harm
Right.
animals.
So
That's just the thing. You don't harm people. You don't harm animals. You don't harm.
now again, and I've heard this before. It's like the argument is, well, once you open the door, and this has been the argument on some ends of the spectrum in regards to alternate lifestyles. It's just like, well, you know, if you allow lesbianism, soon people will be marrying cats and dogs. You know, and it's like, oh wow, we've really just gone off the beaten path.
Yeah.
But that's the element of the justification of the context of that framework.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks, oh well, you know, this is morally wrong, whatever. You know, morality has changed so much over the centuries.
Yeah, what is? I mean,
it's like at one point it was like I would be a whore for showing my ankles, you know, and it's just like, you know, what's right, what's wrong. I think it just comes down to the fact of, empathy. We need to have empathy and care for each other as people, for each other as beings, whatever sexuality. If they want to wear makeup, they don't want to wear makeup. They want to wear a dress, they don't want to wear a dress. You know, it doesn't fucking matter. It's like we should care for the individual and their choices. As long as it's their choices and they're staying in their lane, it's not a threat to me. Why should I be upset about it?
But what is a threat?
What is a threat? Something that's directly a threat to me, like physically, like a threat to my well-being as far as my physical self.
But again, how do we define that?
Physical
It could
self.
be a threat to my God.
Well, let your God come.
My God doesn't like this.
Well, let your God come down and tell me.
No, my God says you have to go now.
Now your God needs to come and tell me himself.
But see, there again, becomes the paradox.
Yep.
Shari says, fight or flight, you know, the mob mentality. You know, there's a whole bunch of different variations on the theme that do apply. But they're all, again, as Dave Chappelle said, and again, segueing all the way back around, they're constructs. I talk about this all the time. These are elements that are conditioned, that are built, that are framed within elements, be it, again, religious, cultural, whatever you want to call it. And some of it, again, translates. And you can use examples within elements of our own culture. Like, again, and to use another framework to give a comparison with, there is a lot of unsettled elements with words, languages. So you have one end of the spectrum where you have black comedians and black musicians that can use certain words and languages freely because of the element that these words, unfortunately, were used in a negative context against them. But many of these very same comedians and musicians say, no, that's not bullshit. This is a cultural element that's part of the framework of how we communicate, how we express. AKA, that word is not applied in the same element. Now, I'm not going to be that asshole tonight and do the South Park episode and be that guy.
Okay.
So I think everybody knows the word that I'm talking about. But there really is a case that we have become so warped out on the semantical end of the spectrum that as soon as it goes outside the box, and then somebody is just like, oh, that you know what? Maybe you should be offended. You know, I'm sorry.
There's a case for that. Absolutely.
You know, we'll get pissed
If
off.
you're offended, walk on by.
Right. You know, and to use his analogy, you know, we'll lose our minds over this shit, but, you know, all these other ridiculously insane elements that are going on around us on a daily basis, you know, again, why don't we all go down and we stop driving? Okay. We just shut down the fucking oil companies. You know what I mean? But we'll go fucking Twitter crazy. We'll go Facebook fucking crazy. And, hey, let's boycott Dave Chappelle because he's transphobic. He's really a bad guy. Look at the way he talks about white people. Really? We don't need that you know what I mean? If we would put half the fucking effort into going after a fucking comedian.
We need those comedians to point out the idiocies, the
Ah,
lunacies,
thank
the
you.
crazies, I mean, you know, pick one of your other favorites.
George Carlin.
Exactly. You knew exactly where I was going. He was the one who would stand up and say the things that were unpopular. And that, like I said, goes right back to the fools in the king's court. They would say the one thing.
I'm going to start a new framework of conspiracy because there's all these other fucked up conspiracies. You got Q, you got, you know, the fat guy really won, shit, all those other fucked up elements. Here's my conspiracy, people, and feel free to run with it and post it all over the place.
Oh, dear.
Okay? And it's going to be I'm going to use the Jeffrey Epstein analogy. George Carlin didn't kill himself. It was a conspiracy between the Vatican and God because George was running around exposing their double-dipping, behind-the-scenes bullshit that they needed to get George out. They needed to get George out of the fucking way. So, spread the truth, okay? George Carlin didn't die of natural causes, okay? It was the church and God. They interfered. They've been fucking with all of you. George knew the truth. He was trying to preach the truth. And just like so many others before him, his life got snuffed out, okay?
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a whole new Da Vinci Code movie about how the church killed Carlin.
No, you'll never get that close to it. There's too much at stake. You know, they got too much, you know. They got too many priests fucking little boys and, you know, bank fraud and got too much more important shit to worry about now because they got him off the thing. But here's the beautiful thing. George was smart. George planted the seeds, and it's up to the rest of us now to carry that element and hold God responsible. Okay? Let's cancel God.
Oh, goodness.
You want a fucking cancel movement? Let's cancel God.
Well, let's cancel the God that people have created. I don't
know. No, I'm talking this particular God. There's plenty of gods. I mean, it's like Jesus Christ. It's not like we don't have enough gods to go around.
That's true.
We got too many fucking chefs in the kitchen, man. We need to get rid of a couple of them.
They're
fucking things up because they can't. Just like everything else in life, you can't get a fucking consensus between them.
Why don't we just get rid of the ones that think that they're the only ones?
No, you know, I'm thinking you make a good example. You know, sometimes all it takes is a good crucifixion to really send a message that carries well.
Well, Disney tried to claim Loki. Yeah,
well,
I've got a statue of Loki on my altar over here.
But I think I think especially, you know, it's you not only just for George, but for Dave. You know, if you want to support Dave Chappelle, I say we start a cancel God movement.
Oh goodness.
Okay, let's just really throw it right back in their fucking faces. Let's just be like, you know what? We've all had enough. It's time. It doesn't mean that your God is I'm saying the God that killed George Carlin.
Okay.
And the God that's been fucking with Dave Chappelle. Okay, the other gods are cool. We can let them ride.
They tried to sue people for anything Loki. That's
yeah, well,
crazy.
you know.
Loki's been around for thousands.
You can blame
years.
Scientology for that. They're the ones that set the stage.
Yeah.
You can create any kind of fucking insane bullshit as long as you got a couple of high-priced lawyers behind you. You can force it down people's throats. You know, welcome to the fucking chaos machine.
This goes into the whole entitlement thing. And that actually goes in with Dave Chappelle and even George Carlin. Everybody feels like they're entitled to and they are entitled to their opinion, but they're entitled to shove their opinion down everybody else's fucking throats.
Hey, listen, if you don't like it, just change the fucking channel. You don't gotta listen.
All I'm saying.
But it also doesn't give you the right, though, to destroy the element of somebody else.
No, and that his transgender friend killed herself for all that.
Well, you know, and again, in fairness, you know, Dave made it a point to specifically state that he doesn't know if it was that. But I think everybody here and anybody that has any framework of empathy understands that these types of things, they carry over. They have collateral damage effects in regards to other people. Now, again, that doesn't mean, okay, that you have to believe or you have to accept. But again, how we choose to react becomes the defining element. May, that's a great one too. Sam Kinison was another one, very outspoken.
Yes.
He went all kinds of fucked up places. I remember the first time he did his skit about Jimmy Swaggart and
yeah.
the whole Tammy Faye.
That's
and,
when my parents
you know,
hated him because they
Sam
loved
ripped him a
all the
new
whole
asshole.
700 Club thing.
Sam took it to fucking necrophilia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He went deep.
He went deep with that.
But he was right. Okay?
He really was.
There are certain elements that do not fly. They are contradictory in nation. They are double standard fucking USA.
Big time.
Grade A. Inspected.
Yep.
Yes, Sam was the
He
screamer.
was definitely a screamer. Yes.
Listen, I mean, again, there's always the framework of taste. You know what I mean? I was a big fan when I was a kid of Lenny Bruce. And for those of you maybe you're not familiar, Lenny Bruce was another comic from the 60s who was very controversial in many of the elements that he was exploring at the time. You know, elements of racism, elements of sexuality, the political hypocrisy of, you know, elements of what was going on. Red Fox. I mean, listen, there are so many, you know, Paul Mooney, you know, who, you know, passed not that long ago, was hugely influential with guys like Red Fox and Richard Pryor and a lot of the other black comedians. He was very underrated, but he was a writer for all of them. You know, he was one of the driving elements for a lot of those comedy aspects. And also, too, the cultural and societal reflections of the time. You know what I mean? Again,
comedy has been a driving force for change over a lot of years.
Absolutely. And it's also it's magic, because you can use comedy to deflect.
Yes.
You can use comedy to refocus, to soothe. You know, there's so many elements that comedy can be applied in a very positive and helpful, healing context. Again, not everybody's going to see it the same way. You know what I mean? Some people, like, you know, as soon as a fart joke comes out, they're offended because they feel that it's childish. Me personally, I love a good fart joke.
Yes, you do.
You know what I mean? You just, hey, I happen to think, you know, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith. You know, he's a Jersey guy like I am, from the same neck of the woods as me. And, you know, I love some of those childish type of,
the boys were
you
just
know,
talking about Kevin Smith
pot and
earlier
dick,
today.
you know what I mean? It just...
I heard that there was a rumor that Kevin Smith is only funny to people from Jersey. That's what the boys were
you know,
talking about.
I don't think
There was a
that's the
long-standing
case.
joke of that. But no, obviously he's more funny than that, so...
Laura, we are
we're
not actually...
reading tonight.
Yes,
We're
this
just
is open discussion.
podcasting.
So
Podcast.
if there's something you'd like to throw out there, if you got a question about something, it won't be a traditional reading.
No, but we'll talk
But
about
we'll be
shit.
happy to give you whatever insight of the universe has. That is
Sherry,
the difference.
Maya Angelou, love her. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. That is a powerful, powerful book, and highly recommend. I actually hit the ban list a few times because of that.
Oh,
But,
I mean, you know.
but
Welcome
I Know
to
Why
the George
Cage
Orwell
Bird
Book
Sings.
Club.
Yes, right. Is just a beautiful, transformative piece. It's gorgeous. It's wonderful.
But this has been the case throughout time. You know, you had elements within literature. You know what I mean? Be it Shakespeare, be it Plato, be it Byron. You know what I mean? That cross within those elements that, you know, made people uncomfortable. And
Sure,
you know,
I
Bill Bohr, I think, is another one. He catches a little bit of heat here and there because he tends to speak in that kind of really blunt, you know, like, I'm an Irish fucking asshole, and this is, you know what I mean? And, you know, he doesn't give a shit. It's kind of like Dennis Leary was back in the day. I mean, Dennis Leary did a special back in the days, and it was literally called I'm an Asshole. And the whole show was just basically about all the different ways that he was a fucking asshole. He hated this, he hated that, he hated you, he hated me. These are all the fucked up
He's
things.
an equal opportunity asshole.
Well, George Carlin talked about that a lot. George Carlin was like, I'm an equal opportunity hater.
Yep.
I hate everybody.
There you go. Now, Sherry, I'm going to be unpopular for a minute with you because Mother Teresa does not. I would challenge you to look behind the curtain of her. She does not hold up to scrutiny after looking behind the curtain, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean, again, to some degrees, it's perspective driven. if you look at it in a framework, and I understand the analogy you're going, and without segueing too far down
That's a big rabbit
the
hole.
rabbit
if you wanna
hole,
go down there.
she still represented a
She
lot
was
of
the face to a lot of
positive
charity.
elements.
Yes. And if you just look on the outside of the curtain and don't look behind the curtain,
Well,
then
again,
it's golden.
you know, you can make that case for all of us.
Actually, you can make a good case for Gandhi on that one too.
Well, you know, I mean,
So,
again,
yeah.
we tend to frame our heroes with less imperfections and
we
less
put 'em on
flaws, and
pedestals, yes.
and unfortunately less humanity, less of those defining.
Yeah, the
element.
idea of her is a beautiful thing. The idea of Mother Teresa, beautiful. The idea of Gandhi, beautiful. Love it. So she's a powerful and beautiful woman. Yeah, I mean, if you don't look behind the curtain, I would challenge you to look that up. That's just my unpopular.
Yeah,
opinion
I mean,
today.
again, it is what it is. Now, Laura just brought up, and I'm gonna kind of allow the little quick segue. Because it doesn't come up often, and in fairness, you know, sometimes we need certain elements of things. So I'm going to address this aspect.
Go for it.
From what it sounds like Laura's talking about, there's this guy that yesterday's reading came as mono, and I'm assuming that came back as a negative content. He says, but what the fuck? The chemistry is beautiful, so what the fuck? His name doesn't matter, honey, but I appreciate you for throwing that context in. Many times, okay, what is good for us, okay, does not translate
She meant to say no.
as no. Okay.
Yeah.
Many times, what is good for us, what is better for us, is not the thing that's going to make us feel good. It's
true.
not the good, powerful chemistry element that you say. And
You can have
this
chemistry with a drug.
well, listen, I mean, again, you said it, I didn't. Now, that isn't to say that what you feel isn't real,
No,
okay?
it could
Because
be good in the moment.
it is relevant to the individual. So
Yes.
I always try and frame this behind, listen, it's okay to feel this way. The trick becomes in looking at what the underlying elements, the pitfalls, the potential, it's a trap.
Red flag.
The
red flag,
the triggers, the elements that could not only be detrimental to us, but that can really shift
Yep.
a dynamic to a place that we really don't want to go. Now, here's the other side of that coin, okay? And I will also, and I've said this before, sometimes we need to learn these lessons the hard way.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as May says, you have to get some dirt on you.
Yep.
And this may be the case. You may have to chase this particular element down the fucking rabbit hole to learn whatever it is that you need to learn. And I don't mean that again in a negative context or in a threatening element, but if the universe is telling you, is giving you red flags, you need to look at that for what it is. Now, with that being said, I don't know, again, the framework of the reading. So
We were looking at two different guys, and neither of them came up as great, and one of them came up as bad news, and I think she's talking about the bad
okay,
news boy.
so you did the reading.
Yes.
Oh, even fucking easier. All right. So we
I can tell you
we
the
can
exact
put the
context.
witch on the hot seat,
Yeah,
Laura.
with the witch on the
Okay,
hot seat.
here we go.
Interview me about said reading.
Yes.
I recall this reading very well.
All right, you will share with me the details of this particular situation.
Okay. So basically, she was looking into two different dudes. But one she's talking to, one that she had butterflies with. Well, Butterfly Boy came up with the Ten of Swords. Yeah. So Butterfly Boy is definitely look like, and of course the Ten of Swords being the stabbing in the back betrayal style card. Okay, so what may seem good right now,
Basically, what I call a fuck boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, going
Just
to
wanted
be
to
a
define that.
problem later.
That's what they're called, Laura. By the way, they're
yes,
called fuck boys.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Now, if that's
so-
all you're looking for, and I don't mean that to be
and that's
disrespectful
what I said, so
or
you gotta scratch
insulting,
an itch.
but
Sometimes.
I speak in very honest, blunt terms. If you're just looking for a sexual experience, then yeah,
Yeah.
you know, but the red flags mean something.
And it basically means if you're going to go out and do it, just keep your guard up. Watch out. Don't turn around and, oh, I'm going to marry him and we're going to have 2.5 children.
Laura's like, be a fuckboy? That's cool.
Yeah.
Listen, that's okay.
Yeah.
We
if you
can,
wanna have your
as
fuckboy-
long as we're being honest and we recognize an
I've
element.
had a fuckboy in my life before.
Yeah.
Okay?
You know what I mean?
I've had a fuck girl in my life
but it's
before.
also
I mean,
again, you know, again, especially if there's an emotional context, to be able to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's, again, not to be offensive. It is always about how we feel. So what you feel is relevant. What you feel is real.
Right.
But understanding how that carries over. I mean, again, using myself as an example, you know, I don't know if it applies or not. For most of my life, I gravitated toward toxic women. Toxic women are what attracted me. I can't explain it. It was just part of my dysfunction. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until
Oh shit.
it's a different framework. But I had to literally go to fucking hell and back and inside out and through all types of crazy shit to learn and understand the lessons that I needed. Don't get me wrong, you know what I mean? Some things are what they are. I have a beautiful son from it. So, you know, it wasn't like it was all bad, but there was a price to be paid. And a lot of times the messages we get, we don't like. But they are,
We've all been
if we're honest with ourselves, they're reflective of what's going in within us.
We've all been through relationships where we're wondering, what the fuck was I thinking when I first got into this? Okay, we have all been there. I don't care, you know, whether it was a brief one, a long one. Some people stay with them for 30 fucking years before they finally wake the fuck up and say, let me out of this.
I mean, I think we all can relate to this. We all want connections. We want to feel good. We want passion. We want pleasure. We want the connection. We want these elements. So, by default, empaths are very, very susceptible to giving more benefit of the doubt than maybe really we should. We'll take bigger chances in those elements, sometimes simply just to save us from fucking being alone. And sometimes that's the bigger question we have to ask ourselves. Why are we gravitating here? What is it exactly that's drawing us? Is it a purely sexual context? Is it because we're connecting with them at some other level? Is it because they remind us of this? Do they look like Brad Pitt?
They make us feel good.
I mean, whatever the fuck the case may be.
A little bit of dopamine, a little bit of chemistry, whatever. You know, and if that's what you want, then go for it. You know, he makes you feel good. But don't turn around and think that you're going to have the perfect life, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and a dog with this dude. That's pretty much what it goes down to.
Well, that gets into also expectations. And that's always the other thing. You know, and if you feel there's a connection, you owe it to yourself to explore it. Because I can tell you this honestly, regardless of whatever the cards say, whatever Shiya may say, whatever I might say, ultimately, you have to answer to yourself. So if you feel compelled, you might really be, you know, better served just exploring it. Now, you have some, again, extra elements that at least you can walk down this road with your eyes open.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And you yourself said that you've seen the red flags. So, hey, you know what? Watch out for those red flags. Make sure that you're not turning a blind eye to them, and have a little fun. Go down the rabbit hole for as much as you need to. Take what you need. Hey,
listen,
to leave the rest behind.
It might be the context of what leads you to the next chapter, the next step. You know, it's
you might
not
learn
always
something from this situation.
Or listen, you might meet his brother, and his brother might be the love of your life.
Yeah, you never know.
I hate to say it, but the universe is fucked up like that sometimes. You know what I mean? You never know what's going to play out of an element, because there are so many possible variations, so many possibilities.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's the old analogy, like they say with the Powerball or the Lotto. You got to be in it to win it.
Yes, absolutely.
You have to be in the game to some
I mean, I've
degree.
put myself through toxic situations because I knew somehow I needed to go through that toxic situation. I didn't know why, but I knew I needed to. I was drawn to that stupid ass toxic situation, and that toxic situation placed me exactly where I needed to be to meet exactly who I needed to meet so that I could live the rest of my life happy.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, I mean, again,
You know?
For whatever it's worth, and I know you say it and I say it a lot, the cards, the readings, these are all insights. They
Yes.
give us flashes, they give us glimpses, and many
Yes.
times they'll give us direct elements of, hey, you don't want to walk off this particular cliff. Now again, perspective being what it is, you have to explore things to the degree that you're being called. If nothing else, to understand why you're being called there.
And also sometimes it's about the questions we ask. We ask, is this person good for me? Then, the answer might be, no, that person is not good for you. But maybe the question should be, do I need to experience something with this person for my further growth? And the answer could be yes.
There you go.
It's all in the
There you
different
go.
question. We asked, is this person good for you? No, not really.
I will use Diane
Okay,
as an example because she and I and you have interacted at different levels.
absolutely.
And I know that she's used these elements to make certain decisions based off of the
insights.
quality
Yeah.
of the question. And that's not to say that anybody's perspective is less or worse, but that is really a great analogy. If you throw in the generic element, am I going to find love? Well, yeah, probably you're going to find love.
Rarely have I had that come up, no, but once in a while it does.
But you see where I'm going.
Yeah.
That's a really open-ended generic framework, and we see
Am I
it.
ever going to be happy? That's another question that some people throw at me. Well, if we're looking at ever, you're gonna have some moments of happiness in your goddamn life, okay?
And Diane was very specific. She was looking at elements within the framework of her life of.
Well, we'd be happy with the yellow house.
Right.
We'd be able to get the yellow house.
Or within the school.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They were very
specific,
focused
questions.
elements that were in play
Uh-huh.
that it gave her another piece to add into the equation. She still did the groundwork,
Yes.
did all the elements, because here's the
Yes.
other thing. The universe doesn't hand it to us on a silver platter.
The gods
We
help
still
those
have
who help themselves.
right, you still have to do the work. You still have to be aware, you have to adapt, you have to listen.
Totally.
Your communication, there's all these other variables, but again, some of it goes back to that construct. A lot of people have this perspective within the psychic realms that, you know what I mean, like it's just a fucking vending machine.
You didn't see that
That
coming.
you
How could
stick
be
your
psychic?
money in, you press a couple buttons, and you get a Snickers bar. Yeah,
Well,
no,
we're connecting with spirit. We're connecting with the energies of the universe, and sometimes it's all in the question we ask. And if we turn around and we get, as we've talked about, empaths, we can spin anything out that we want. We can justify anything. So I can come up
my
with,
God is better than your God.
Pretty much. We can come up with the question that we want to kind of frame the answer the way we want. Anybody's watched this show Lucifer? We've been watching that.
My God has a bigger dick than yours, by the way, too. I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that for the record.
I
Yes,
know.
blasphemy. Thank you. That's the best compliment I've gotten all fucking day. Thank you, Diane. God, that made me feel good. I needed that. Thank you.
But basically, you turn around and you take. Well, now you see you did it to me.
I fucked you up.
You fucked me up, but that's okay. I like it.
Yeah, well,
Somebody will remind me what the hell I was talking.
you were talking about Lucifer.
Oh yeah, Lucifer. So if you watch that show Lucifer, he goes into his therapist and he says something to his therapist Linda.
Okay, can we not talk about me in the third person?
Okay, well we'll talk. So Lucifer goes into his therapist Linda. Apparently the wolf very much identifies with Lucifer.
I'm slightly annoyed that I never realized that so much of my life was just snatched and made into a goddamn television show.
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure.
Lieutenant
I'm not
Douchebag.
sure how the fuck that happened, and
Yep.
I don't know where I was when this all went down.
But
I guess I was isolating and hiding up here, so
probably,
that must have been what happened.
So basically, the therapist says something to him like, well, you need to work on, do you think somebody else might be at fault, trying to get him to think, well, maybe I might have some fault in this. He goes, oh, no, you're right. This other person's definitely at fault. I'm going to go do that right now. And she's like, but that's not what I said. People, we will spin out whatever we want.
Well, I mean,
if we hear an answer and we want it to go a particular direction, we will make that answer work for us somehow.
It's like anything else. We can justify, we can spin, we can create the illusions, and Laura is just like, yeah, big dicks are a must. Yeah, that's the general consensus construct that somehow big dicks are better. I will tell you this, and I will just say this, and it may be controversial. I have encountered women who have been like, it's cool as a novelty, but you're not putting that in me.
I agree with that.
So,
I agree with that.
Again,
Completely.
how much of this is construct versus granted? Exceptions to the rule.
I actually had a friend who had an exceptionally large dick and would always whine about the fact that he could never get guys, well, in this case, because his dick was too big, and they look at that and they're like, fuck no.
Yeah,
no.
see, and what element in a framework of, again, toxic masculinity would be the ultimate grail? I have the golden cock. Okay, but the reality,
the perfect ratio,
that's only really going to fly with crack whores and porn stars.
Yeah, and I don't know.
You know what I mean? So, listen, these are the fucked up. But listen, the same thing is true.
You want
as a young man,
Goldilocks stick.
Listen,
not too big, not too small, just
all right.
right.
Well, I don't know what the Goldilocks cock is, but that's definitely another podcast. Again, as a young man, being a musician within the whole rock and roll scene and stuff like that, I had a construct within the bad girl mentality, you know what I mean? The elements of the overemphasized sexuality and the elements of, being more free and wild, rock and roll, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it was a fucking nightmare because the levels of dysfunctionality, the daddy issues, the broken self-esteem, the complete disconnect from any reality. The truth of the matter was, and it didn't, it didn't take, it took a few years, but it didn't take that long to make the connection that it was like plasticine Barbie fucking hell. Well, it was so unreal.
You want to talk about weaponized empathy? Weaponized sexuality is a thing.
Oh yes,
that's a
weaponized
whole other thing.
Ooh, that that's going to be an upcoming podcast. That deserves a podcast.
That deserves its own podcast.
Fuck yeah, no, that's really great. Yeah, Shia hit that one.
Okay,
that's a 400-foot home run over the green wall. Weaponized sexuality.
Yeah,
yes,
that's a whole other thing. So.
Well, weaponized empathy, weaponized sexuality—they're both within the same framework because it is an empathic element. Sexuality, again, is just one of those hyper ends of the spectrum because it is, in many ways, the core of our existence. The reproductive cycle, the drive to mate, to mount and hump. Yeah. Anything.
That is true.
Anything that breathes.
Well,
bring it on.
Yeah. What was that whole thing of the men's biological imperative is to spread their seed, and the woman's biological imperative is to look for safety and security. So it explains why it's okay for guys to go fucking around, but women have to stay at home. I have heard that used as a justification for that.
Well, listen, again, the Italian American construct, the wives were the sacred Mary figures, the bearer of their children. Madonna. So there are certain sexual elements that they would not participate with their wives that they would with the gumbas.
With their side chick.
With the side chicks, right. Because they were two completely different spectrums. The mother figure was sacred. The gumba was just a piece of ass. It was pure sexual.
So what do they call it in Italian?
We're not. That's another podcast. I'm not going there. No, you'll have to do your own research.
I know, and well, I'll just call her Sancha because that's what it is.
Well, you know, and one word is good as any.
Sancha,
But
you know.
but these are again, these are
Yeah.
again cultural constructs
Mm-hmm.
that are built and framed. You remember we were talking with our friend on the street here, Kevin, and he was talking about some of the elements from people that he knows from Northern Africa within the very strict Muslim elements
Yes.
about how the women are dressed a particular way to obscure the elements of sexuality, so that way it's not a framework within the whole courting, the
Yeah.
whole element that exists within the natural dynamic that, you know, men want to fuck women. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
men want to fuck men, and
Sometimes.
women like to fuck women sometimes too. That can
And
be
sometimes
kind of
men
cool.
like
I mean,
dribbles,
it really
but
well.
hey.
See, I was having a perfectly good lesbian fantasy, and you had to throw the gerbils into it.
Absolutely.
See, that's
You
fucked
brought
up.
up the gerbils
That's
earlier.
fucked up.
You brought up the gerbils earlier.
Yeah, but I had
You
already
brought
left
into
that
the con-
behind. That was a case of a point within a framework of the moment.
But once
So what? You just
once
as
you
soon as
do
I
that,
was like, oh,
yeah.
I hit lesbians, and she's like, nope, the real that shit.
gerbils.
Yeah, Ash says the wife is the Madonna Mary, while the
Yes.
side chick is how they get the dirt out, right?
Yes,
Yeah, they do all
absolutely.
the nasty little horrible things that you you won't talk about. You know what I mean? But listen, even within an element,
That's been around for thousands
and this
of
was a
years.
framework that was I had never seen this approached up front until an episode of The Sopranos. One of the aspects within the Italian American community, and it's a really again specific framework, that men who went down on women, aka had oral sex with women, made them basically less than. It was representative that it made them less of a man. That somehow that made them almost kind of gay. And it really was this fucked up analogy.
I don't understand that. I really don't understand that.
Again, it has to go
Makes no
back
sense.
to kind of like what Ash mentioned, the
But then
the
again,
whole
the
Madonna.
good
Yeah,
girl-
Ash knows it, Junior. Yeah, she saw the episode.
But a woman also is a dirty whore if she goes down on a man.
Well, no,
No,
not
that's,
always.
that's how it comes from the southern side. You
Right.
don't
It
give
it
blowjobs,
right.
you
It
dirty
depends
whore,
on
you
the
give a
framework of the
blowjob.
context. Yes, in the
Uh-huh.
South, certain elements of things are just.
I grew up in the South.
But
That was the thing.
within the Italian American framework, yeah, you couldn't eat pussy without it being like, what the fuck's wrong with you? But here was the truth: most, if not all of them, were eating pussy left and right. You just couldn't talk about it openly
Okay.
for the fear of right. Yes, and Ash has it. His lady friend bragged to the wrong people and got back to Tony. To serve a female is unmanly, and that's a great reference. To serve.
To serve.
To again renounce control and power. You see where I'm going? These are again the constructs,
I don't
those
know.
perspectives.
I think a guy that's doing that has all the power at the moment.
But again, you got to remember again. This is framed
It's
within.
like, what do you want? Yes, you can have whatever
It's
you
framed
want.
within a cultural construct.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Another analogy I will throw in there, and I thought it was a great one. Anybody who's read any of Anne Rice's work,
Oh yeah.
Anne
I have read all of her
Rice
stuff.
definitely ripped into that particular framework in one of the novels within her Vampire Lestat series, and it was the book in question is called Memnoch the Devil.
Memnoch the Devil.
And in Memnoch, basically, Lestat has an experience with a nun, okay, and he basically
Vampire
he feeds on her during her menstrual cycle,
Oh, I remember that.
okay, and she uses that framework to really rip into and break down some of the social and cultural taboo element in regards to women and their sexuality, especially framed within the whole cycle of life, the menstrual element. But it was also the analogy within the blood, within the context of blood. Because listen, Christianity is a blood religion, okay? It is a religion that is based on the framework that Jesus, the communion and the ritual is the wine is his blood, and
bread is his body.
bread is his body.
Yep.
So she used that to really break down some of that element.
She breaks down everything. I mean, have you read her, like, The Early Life of Jesus book?
I read a little bit of it, but again, that particular framework for that element I thought was applicable.
She's pissed everybody off, and especially with
listen, because she's ripped apart
any of her
she's ripped apart the Catholic Church for its hypocrisies, and anybody that steps outside the box on that is automatically a fucking target.
I'm sure she has been very much excommunicated.
Cindy makes an interesting context here, and this is a good example, and I think this will be my final segue on the evening, getting back to some of that male toxicity, but also within the conditioning, the constructs of it. She says her husband has lesbian fantasies all the time. Because again, in the framework of male sexuality, women are, from right off the bat, sexualized.
Yes.
At least within our modern culture today. In all the elements.
Been for thousands of years.
TV, music, literature, clothing, fucking beer, across the board, women are, for better or for worse, sexualized.
Yes.
Okay? And within the framework of male masculinity is that element of the possession, the control, the domination element. So multiple women frames this now kind of almost euphoric element, not only within the sexual context, but within that whole power module of the elements. Now, that's not to say that that's always the case, but one of the interesting things, and we know this from research that we've done, and I know this personally from too many goddamn conversations over the years, most guys are fine with two women. Yes. They will be like, two women can get together, they can eat each other's assholes till hell freezes over. But soon as another guy comes into the context, it's all off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything goes out the goddamn window. It becomes an affront to God and nature and blah, blah, blah. Because, again, of the context of that controlling element. Mm-hmm. Male homosexuality is weak. It is a framework of something that is corrupted, something that is warped, perverse.
Yep.
Female homosexuality is a gift. It's blessing. It's beauty. It's pleasure. You know what I mean? And it is this wacky.
It's a horrible contradiction. Yeah.
Now, I will say this honestly, and for any guy that's out there listening now, or for any guys that are going to listen to the future, most of it, and I would say easily, conservatively, 90% of it is bullshit. It's illusion. It doesn't work that way. Porn is not real.
No, it is not.
Okay? These are created constructs to emphasize certain elements within what we call fantasy.
Lesbian sex does not look like it does in the porn movies.
Well, it does sometimes.
Not the ones I've seen.
Well,
okay.
I guess it really depends on which one you're looking at. And it depends on the women in question.
Yeah.
But the construct, the illusion, again, is framed from all these other elements that condition us, or men, specifically in this case, to act and react within a particular way. Now, I'm not justifying. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's right. However, again, because these elements exist, the only way I believe that we can get around them to any degree is having, as you say, the honest conversations.
Yes.
Because listen, most men can't handle one woman, let alone multiple women in any real framework. Okay.
Ash says it depends on if your partner has stretched appropriately before.
Now listen, there are some guys that have made it their life's journey to be, as I referred to earlier, fuckboys.
Yeah.
That's all they do. They're just a big walking, talking dildo
Yep.
with a really, really long-lasting battery. Okay, cool. That is what it is. But if you're but if you're looking for anything emotional, anything concrete, if you're looking for a context of trust or dependability or empathy or any of those types of things,
or companionship.
Guess what? You can throw that shit right out the window.
Yeah,
now that isn't to say that there isn't a case to be made that sometimes it is just about a sexual element, and that's okay as long as it is framed within honesty.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
If you're being honest with yourself and everybody else involved is being honest, you can make a case for it. Because it is just
honesty.
One element of things. It doesn't have to be reflective. But, I can't tell you how many guys, who would be like, oh, I wish I could get my girlfriend. I'm like, no, you don't. Because guess what? She's probably going to have a better time with the chick, and you're going to have all your fucking insecurities spin out of control when your fucking dick can't get hard.
That is
because
true.
You don't know what the fuck to do, and it's going to go bad, man. Trust me. And it does. Almost every time I've seen it, my personal experiences, it didn't work out the way I thought it was. Granted, it was framed in a different context, and it didn't go bad because of my element. It went bad because of other elements. And
right.
Yeah, you know what? Will's old enough. If he goes back and listens to this, I mean, I guess it's not going to destroy him. But yeah, unfortunately, my wife at the time was also bisexual and liked to bring random women into the mix. The unfortunate reality, though, was because I'm an empath, they would end up being more drawn to me than they were her, and that's where the backfire happened. Now, again, that's not to say that these things can't be enjoyed. I always recommend to people, if you're not sure about your sexuality, explore your sexuality. You know what I mean? Because how else are you going to figure it out? How else are you going to learn? How else are you going to know? And life is about the living. And I know you're laughing at Ash's comment. If you can't find the magic button on one, why would two be better? Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know what I mean? And most men, do not have a healthy context on their own sexuality, let alone understanding somebody else's. That's why you have so much infidelity. That's why you have so much breakdown in the framework of relationships, is that it's usually spun out. And no, I don't know if that's how fake vanilla was found.
We're right back to the fake vanilla again.
Well, I mean, that's always a really easy go-to, in that framework. But yes, it is, again, a difficult element. Now, I can't truly relate to it because I'm not bisexual. I've had experiences within the framework of other women, but I don't have a context. I don't have a framework of that other side of the coin. And I will be the first one. I'll be the first one to admit, I have no problem in the context of interactions with other women. I have some comfortability. In other words, I'm okay if there are other guys in the mix, as long as there's no tip connections, like your hand's not on my ass. You know what I mean? I have very definitive conditioned elements. I'm not into guys. I don't begrudge you it. But that's just, but listen, this is the defining element of who we are. That's what you're attracted to and what you're not. Right. It doesn't matter. You're attracted to what you are. Right. So that there are frameworks of elements that, to some degrees, yes, they are conditioning, but they're honest. Yeah. Just in the same framework, if you're attracted to a particular element for whatever it is, that's unique to you. You know what I mean? And I empathize, with Cindy, because it's a tough line to sometimes juggle, because you have the sexual and then you have everything else. You have the emotional, you have the mental, you have to some degrees even the spiritual connections, and they don't always jive, they don't always connect in with the sexual.
Well, for me, I just frame too much around empathy. If I don't have an emotional connection of some kind, even if it's just a base level friendship, I'm not comfortable with a sexual.
Well, that was the framework where what I believe, and we've talked about it before, why you and I work, is that we didn't frame it around that. We framed it
We
from
had our relationship
the other
first.
elements. We were friends. We developed the communication. We
Yes.
developed the
All
aspects of understanding.
And then there was chemistry.
And then I had to fuck the shit out of you.
Okay.
So, but hey, that's another story altogether.
That's a whole other story. But
Yeah, actually,
yes.
people use preferences as triggers now against themselves. They use it against other people.
Yeah, and-
This is the weapon. You were saying it, weaponized sexuality.
So that'll be a whole nother podcast.
Absolutely. So listen, it was really great. It is going on 10 p.m. We are at that
Magic
witching
hour.
Ooh.
Yes. And there's fajitas downstairs.
I have something else maybe I'll eat, but that's, another context for another story.
Oh.
I know where her button is, baby. Yes, indeed. So, if
I
you
will
could,
not argue that one.
I'm going to close out with a little video music track that I had put together. I've had it up, but I wanted to incorporate it into the podcast. It is kind of a combination. The video is just a lot of still photography elements from my journey within the group that I've talked about, the Under My Skin for Life Foundation, playing within the band with my stun and stuff. So it was kind of one of those little tribute things I threw together, and I put the instrumental version of one of my songs, Birds. And Birds was
It was Birds
in the Field, but it was really one of the first songs that I had written in that framework, and one of the first ones that I had put out there as okay, here is me. Here's the old wolf. This is not me doing somebody else's thing. This is not me doing that. This is really me. This is an element of my life, my demons, my fears, my loves, my world, my experiences. And I wanted to make sure that it was, as they say, into the podcast time capsule.
Okay.
So without further ado, we're going to close out with that. I want to thank you all again for coming out and interacting. I really appreciate it. Love you all. Know that you are all loved. Remember, again, Shiya's going to crack out some shit tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. She's got that new swear deck.
Swear Tarot.
So she'll be doing her live again on Facebook and YouTube. So I'm going to switch it over. I'm going to play this out, and you guys have a great night.